waiting in a hot tureen, who for such dainties would not stoop. Soup of the evening, beautiful soup. Soup of the evening, beautiful soup. Beautiful soup. Beautiful soup. Soup of the evening. Beautiful, beautiful soup. Beautiful soup, who cares for fish, game, or any other dish? Who would not give all else for two pennyworth only of beautiful soup? Pennyworth only of beautiful soup. Beautiful soup. Beautiful soup. Soup of the evening. Beautiful, beautiful soup.
He thought he saw an elephant that practiced on a pipe. He looked again and found it was a letter from his wife. At length I realize, he said, the bitterness of life. He thought he saw a buffalo upon the chimney-piece. He looked again and found it was his sister's husband's niece. Unless you leave this house, he said, I'll send for the police. He thought he saw a rattlesnake that questioned him in Greek. He looked again and found it was the middle of next week. The one thing I regret, he said, is that it cannot speak. He thought he saw a banker's clerk descending from the bus. He looked again and found it was a hippopotamus. If this should start to die, he said, there won't be much for us. He thought he saw a kangaroo that worked a coffee mill. He looked again and found it was a vegetable pill. Were I to swallow this, he said, I should be very ill. He thought he saw a coach and four that stood beside his bed. He looked again and found it was a bear without a head. Poor thing, he said, poor silly thing, it's waiting to be fed. He thought he saw an albatross that fluttered round the lamp. He looked again and found it was a penny postage stamp. You'd best be getting home, he said, the nights are very damp. He thought he saw an argument that proved he was the Pope. He looked again and found it was a bar of mottled soap. A fact so dread, he faintly said, extinguishes all hope.
"'Tis the voice of the lobster," I heard him declare. "You have baked me too brown. I must sugar my hair." As a duck with its eyelids, so he with his nose trims his belt and his buttons and turns out his toes. When the sands are all dry, he's as gay as a lark, and will talk in contemptuous tones of the shark. But when the tide rises and sharks are around, his voice has a timid and tremulous sound.
I passed by his garden and marked with one eye how the owl and the panther were sharing the pie. The panther took pie crust and gravy and meat, while the owl had the dish as its share of the treat. When the pie was all finished, the owl, as a boon, was kindly permitted to pocket the spoon, while the panther received knife and fork with a growl, and concluded the banquet by,
You are old, Father William, the young man said, and your hair has become very white, and yet you incessantly stand on your head. Do you think at your age it is right? In my youth, Father William replied to his son, I feared it might injure the brain, but now that I'm perfectly sure I have none, why, I do it again and again. You are old, said the youth, as I mentioned before, and have grown most uncommonly fat, yet you turned a back somersault in at the door. Pray, what is the reason? I kept all my limbs very supple by the use of this ointment. 1 shilling the box. Allow me to sell you a couple? You are old, said the youth, and your jaws are too weak for anything tougher than suet. Yet you finished the goose with the bones and the beak. Pray, how did you manage to do it? In my youth, said his father, I took to the law and argued each case with me wife, and the muscular strength which it gave to me jaw has lasted the rest of me life. You are old, said the youth. One would hardly suppose that your eye was as steady as ever. Yet you balanced an eel on the end of your nose. What made you so awfully clever? I have answered 3 questions, and that is enough, said his father. Don't give yourself airs. Do you think I can listen all day to such stuff? Be off, or I'll kick you downstairs.
Little birds are dining warily and well, hid in mossy cell, hid, I say, by waiters, gorgeous in their gaiters. I've a tale to tell. Little birds are feeding justices with jam, rich in frizzled ham, rich, I say, in oysters, haunting shady cloisters. That is what I am. Little birds are teaching tigresses to smile, innocent of guile. Smile, I say, not smirkle, mouth a semicircle. That's the proper style. Little birds are sleeping all among the pins, where the loser wins, where, I say, he sneezes when and how he pleases. So the tale begins. There was a pig that sat alone beside a ruined pump. By day and night he made his moan. It would have stirred a heart of stone to see him wring his hoofs and groan, because he could not jump. A certain camel heard him shout, a camel with a hump. Oh, is it grief or is it gout? What is this bellowing about? That pig replied with quivering snout, because I cannot jump. The camel scanned him dreamy-eyed. Methinks you are too plump. I never knew a pig so wide that wobbled so from side to side, who could, however much he tried, do such a thing as jump. Yet, mark those trees 2 miles away, all clustered in a clump. If you could trot there twice a day, nor ever pause for rest or play, in the far future, who can say? You may be fit to jump. That camel passed and left him there beside the ruined pump. Oh, horrid was that pig's despair. His shrieks of anguish filled the air. He wrung his hoofs, he rent his hair, because he could not jump. There was a frog that wandered by, a sleek and shining lump, inspected him with fishy eye, and said, "Oh, pig, what makes you cry?" And bitter was that pig's reply, "Because I cannot jump." That frog, he grinned a grin of glee, and hit his chest a thump. "Oh, pig," he said, "be ruled by me, and you shall see what you shall see. This minute, for a trifling fee, I'll teach you how to jump. You may be faint from many a fall and bruised by many a bump, but if you persevere through all and practice first on something small, concluding with a 10-foot wall, you'll find that you can jump." That pig looked up with joyful start. "Oh, frog, you are a trap. Your words have healed my inward smart. Come, name your fee and do your part. Bring comfort to a broken heart by teaching me to jump." "My fee shall be a mutton chop. My goal this ruined pot. Observe with what an airy flop I plant myself upon the top. Now bend your knees and take a hop, for that's the way to jump." Up rose that pig and rushed full whack against the ruined pump, rolled over like an empty sack, and settled down upon his back, while all his bones at once went crack. It was a fatal jump. Little birds are writing interesting books to be read by cooks, read bread, I say, not roasted. Letterpress, when toasted, loses its good looks. Little birds are playing bagpipes on the shore, where the tourists snore. Thanks, they say, 'tis thrilling. Take, oh, take this shilling. Let us have no more. Little birds are bathing crocodiles in cream, like a happy dream. Like, but not so lasting, crocodiles when fasting are not all they seem. That camel passed as day grew dim around the ruined pump. Oh, broken heart, oh, broken limb, it needs, that camel said to him, something more fairy-like and slim to execute a jump. That pig lay still as any stone, and could not stir a stump, nor ever, if the truth were known, was he again observed to moan, nor ever wring his hoofs and groan, because he could not jump. That frog made no remark, for he was dismal as a dump. He knew the consequence must be that he would never get his fee, and still he sits in misery upon that ruined pump. Little birds are choking baronets with bun, taught to fire a gun, taught, I say, to splinter salmon in the winter, merely for the fun. Little birds are hiding crimes in carpet bags, blessed by happy stags. Blessed, I say, though beaten, since our friends are eaten when the memory flags. Little birds are tasting gratitude and gold, pale with sudden cold, pale, I say, and wrinkled, when the bells have tinkled and the tale is told.
In winter, when the fields are white, I sing this song for your delight. In spring, when woods are getting green, I'll try and tell you what I mean. In summer, when the days are long, perhaps you'll understand the song. In autumn, when the leaves are brown, take pen and ink and write it down. I sent a message to the fish. I told them, this is what I wish. The little fishes of the sea, they sent an answer back to me. The little fishes' answer was, we cannot do it, sir, because. I sent to them again to say, it will be better to obey. The fishes answered with a grin, why, what a temper you are in. I told them once, I told them twice, they would not listen to advice. I took a kettle large and new, fit for the deed I had to do. My heart went hop, my heart went thump. I filled the kettle at the pump. And someone came to me and said, the little fishes are in bed. I said to him, and I said it plain, then you must wake them up again. I said it very loud and clear. I went and shouted in his ear. But he was very stiff and proud. He said, you needn't shout so loud. And he was very proud and stiff. He said, I'd go and wake them if. I took a corkscrew from the shelf. I went to wake them up myself. And when I found the door was locked, I pulled and pushed, I kicked and knocked. And when I found the door was shut, I tried to turn the handle, but...
Will you walk a little faster? Said a whiting to a snail. There's a porpoise close behind us, and he's treading on my tail. See how eagerly the lobsters and the turtles all advance. They're waiting on the shingle. Will you come and join the dance? Will you, won't you, will you, won't you, will you join the dance? Will you, won't you, will you, won't you join the dance? You can really have no notion how delightful it will be when they take us up and throw us with the lobsters out to sea. But the snail replied, too far, and gave a look askance. Said he thanked the whiting kindly, but he would not join the dance. Would not, could not, would not, could not, would not join the dance. Would not, could not, would not, could not join the dance. What matters it how far we go, his scaly friend replied. The further off from England, the nearer is to France. There is another shore, you know, upon the other side. Then turn not pale, beloved snail, but come and join the dance. Will you, won't you, will you, won't you, will you join the dance? Will you, won't you, will you, won't you, will you join the dance?
I'll tell thee everything I can. There's little to relate. I saw an aged man sitting on a gate. Who are you, aged man, I said, and how is it you live? And his answer trickled through my head like water through a sieve. He said, I look for butterflies that sleep among the wheat. I make them into mutton pies and sell them in the street. I sell them unto men, he said, who sail on stormy seas. And that's the way I get my bread. A trifle, if you please. But I was thinking of a plan to dye one's whiskers green, and always use so large a fan that they could not be seen. So, having no reply to give to what the old man said, I cried, Come, tell me how you live, and thumped him on the head. His accents mild took up the tale. He said, I go my ways, and when I find a mountain rill, I set it in a blaze, and thence they make a stuff they call Rowland's Macassar oil, yet twopence halfpenny is all they give me for my toil. But I was thinking of a way to feed oneself on batter, and so go on from day to day, getting a little fatter. I shook him well from side to side until his face was blue. Come, tell me how you live, I cried, and what is it you do? He said, I hunt the haddock's eyes among the heather bright, and work them into waistcoat buttons in the silent night. And these I do not sell for gold or coin of silvery shine, but for a copper halfpenny, and that will purchase 9. I sometimes dig for buttered rolls, or set limed twigs for crabs. I sometimes search the grassy knolls for wheels of handsome cabs, and that's the way, he gave a wink, by which I get my wealth, and very gladly will I drink your honour's noble health. I heard him then, for I had just completed my design to keep the men I bridged from rust by boiling it in wine. I thanked him much for telling me the way he got his wealth, but chiefly for his wish that he might drink my noble health. And now, if e'er by chance I put my fingers into glue, or madly squeeze a right-hand foot into a left-hand shoe, or if I drop upon my toe a very heavy weight, I weep. For it reminds me so of that old man I used to know, whose look was mild, whose speech was slow, whose hair was whiter than the snow, whose face was very like a crow, with eyes like cinders all aglow, who seemed distracted with his woe, who rocked his body to and fro, and muttered mumblingly and low, as if his mouth were full of dough, who snorted like a buffalo that summer evening long ago, as sitting on the gate.
The sun was shining on the sea, shining with all his might. He did his very best to make the billows smooth and bright, and this was odd, because it was the middle of the night. The moon was shining sulkily, because she thought the sun had got no business to be there after the day was done. It's very rude of him, she said, to come and spoil the fun. The sea was wet as wet could be, the sands were dry as dry. You couldn't see a cloud because no cloud was in the sky. No birds were flying overhead. There were no birds to fly. The walrus and the carpenter were walking close at hand. They wept like anything to see such quantities of sand. If this were only cleared away, they said, it would be grand. If 7 maids with 7 mops swept it for half a year, do you suppose, the walrus said, that they could get it clear? I doubt it, said the carpenter, and shed a bitter tear. Oh, oysters, come and walk with us, the walrus did beseech. A pleasant walk, a pleasant talk along the briny beach. We cannot do with more than 4 to give a hand to each. The eldest oyster looked at him, but never a word he said. The eldest oyster winked his eye and shook his heavy head. meaning to say he did not choose to leave the oyster bed. But four young oysters hurried up, all eager for the treat. Their coats were brushed, their faces washed, their shoes were clean and neat. And this was odd, because, you know, they hadn't any feet. Four other oysters followed them, and yet another four, and thick and fast they came at last, and more and more and more, all hopping through the frothing waves and scrambling to the shore. The walrus and the carpenter walked on a mile or so, and then they rested on a rock, conveniently low. And all the little oysters stood and waited in a row. The time has come, the walrus said, to talk of many things, of shoes and ships and sealing wax, of cabbages and kings, and why the sea is boiling hot, and whether pigs have wings. But wait a bit, the oysters cried, before we have our chat, for some of us are out of breath, and all of us are fat. No hurry, said the carpenter. They thanked him much for that. A loaf of bread, the walrus said, is what we chiefly need. Pepper and vinegar besides are very good indeed. Now, if you're ready, oysters dear, we can begin to feed. But not on us, the oysters cried, turning a little blue. After such kindness, that would be a dismal. The night is fine, the walrus said. Do you admire the view? It was so kind of you to come, and you are very nice. The carpenter said nothing but, cut us another slice. I wish you were not quite so deaf. I've had to ask you twice. It seems a shame, the walrus said, to play them such a trick after we brought them out so far and made them trot so quick. The carpenter said nothing but, butter spread too thick. I weep for you, the walrus said. I deeply sympathize. With sobs and tears he sorted out those of the largest size, holding his pocket handkerchief before his streaming eyes. Oh, oysters, said the carpenter, you've had a pleasant run. Shall we be trotting home again? But answer came there none, and this was scarcely odd, because they'd eaten every one.
'Twas brillig and the slithy toads did gyre and gimble in the wave. All mimsy were the burgos, and the morass out grave. Beware the Jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the jube bird, and shun the broomiest burbled as it came. 1, 2, 1, 2, and through, the vorpal blade went snicker-snack. He left it dead, and with its head he went a-lumping back. And hast thou slain the Jabberwock? Come to my arms, my beamish boy. O frabious day, callooh, callay, he chortled in his joy. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy toads did gyre and gimble in the wave. All mimsy were the burgos, and the moan ross out grave.
How pleasant to know Mr. Lear, who has written such volumes of stuff. Some think him ill-tempered and queer, but a few think him pleasant enough. His mind is concrete and fastidious. His nose is remarkably big. His visage is more or less hideous. His beard, it resembles a wig. He has ears and 2 eyes and 10 fingers, leastways, if you reckon 2 thumbs. Long ago he was one of the singers, but now he is one of the dumbs. He sits in a beautiful parlor with hundreds of books on the wall. He drinks a great deal of marsala. never gets tipsy at all. He has many friends, laymen and clerical. Old Foss is the name of his cat. His body is perfectly spherical. He weareth a runcible hat. When he walks in a waterproof white, the children run after him so, calling out, "He's come out in his nightgown, that crazy old Englishman! Ha ha ha!" He weeps by the side of the ocean. He weeps on the top of the hill. He purchases pancakes and lotion and chocolate shrimps from the mill. He reads, but he cannot speak Spanish. He cannot abide ginger beer. Ere the days of his pilgrimage vanish, how pleasant to know Mr. Lear.
There was a young person of Smyrna whose grandmother threatened to burn her, but she seized on the cat and said, "Granny Burnett, you incongruous old woman of Smyrna."
There was an old man who said, "Hush, I perceive a young bird in this bush." Then they said, "Is it small?" He replied, "Not at all. It is 4 times as big as the bush."
There was an old person of Sark who made an unpleasant remark, but they said, "Don't you see what a brute you must be, you obnoxious old person of Sark?"
2 old bachelors were living in one house. One caught a muffin, and the other caught a mouse. Said he who caught the muffin to him who caught the mouse, "This happens just in time, for we've nothing in the house, save a tiny slice of lemon and a teaspoonful of honey. And what to do for dinner, since we haven't any money? And what can we expect if we haven't any dinner, but to lose our teeth and eyelashes and keep on growing thinner?" Said he who caught the mouse to him who caught the muffin, "We might cook this little mouse if we only had some stuffing. If we had but sage and onion, we could do extremely well. But how to get that stuffing, it is difficult to tell." Those 2 old bachelors ran quickly to the town and asked for sage and onions as they wandered up and down. They borrowed 2 large onions, but no sage was to be found in the shops or in the market or in all the gardens round. But someone said, "A hill there is a little to the north, and to its perpendicular top a narrow way leads forth, and there among the rugged rocks abides an ancient sage, an earnest man, who reads all day a most perplexing page. Climb up and seize him by the toes, all studious as he sits, and pull him down and chop him into endless little bits. Then mix him with your onion, cut up likewise into scraps, when your stuffing will be ready, and very good, perhaps." Those 2 old bachelors, without loss of time, the nearly perpendicular crags at once began to climb, and at the top, among the rocks, all seated in a nook, they saw that sage, a reading of a most enormous book. "You earnest sage," aloud they cried, "your book you've read enough in. We wish to chop you into bits to mix you into stuffing." And that old sage looked calmly up, and with his awful book, at those 2 bachelors' bald heads a certain aim he took. And over crag and precipice they rolled promiscuous down. At once they rolled and never stopped in lane or field or town. And when they reached their house, they found, besides the want of stuffing, the mouse had fled, and previously had eaten up the muffin. They left their home in silence by the once convivial door, and from that hour, those bachelors were never heard of more.
There was a young lady whose bonnet came untied when the birds sat upon it. But she said, "I don't care. All the birds in the air are welcome to sit on my bonnet."
There was a young lady whose chin resembled the point of a pin, so she had it made sharp and purchased a harp and played several tunes with her chin.
There was an old man with a gong, who bumped at it all the day long. They called out, "Oh, law, you horrid old bore." So they smashed that old man with a gong.
There was an old man of Whitehaven who danced a quadrille with a raven. But they said, "It's absurd to encourage this bird." So they smashed that old man of Whitehaven.
There was an old man in a tree who was horribly bored by a bee. When they said, "Does it buzz?" he replied, "Yes, it does. It's a regular brute of a bee."
The pobble who has no toes had once as many as we. When they said, "Some day you may lose them all," he replied, "Fish, little the day." And his Aunt Jobiska made him drink lavender water tinged with pink, for she said, "The world in general knows there's nothing so good for a pobble's toes." The pobble who has no toes swam across the Bristol Channel, but before he set out, he wrapped his nose in a piece of scarlet flannel, for his Aunt Jobiska said, "No harm can come to his toes if his nose is warm, and it's perfectly known that a pobble's toes are safe, provided he minds his nose." The pobble swam fast and well, and when boats or ships came near him, he tinkled a binkleby winkled a bell, so that all the world could hear him. And all the sailors and admirals cried when they saw him nearing the further side, "He is gone to fish for his Aunt Jobiska's runcible cat with crimson whiskers." But before he touched the shore of the Bristol Channel, a sea-green porpoise carried away his wrapper of scarlet flannel, and when he came to observe his feet, formerly garnished with toes so neat, his face at once became forlorn, on perceiving that all his toes were gone. And nobody ever knew from that dark day to the present whoso had taken the pobble's toes in a manner so far from pleasant. Whether the shrimps or crawfish gray or crafty mermaids stole them away, nobody knew. And nobody knows how the pobble was robbed of his twice 5 toes. The pobble who has no toes was placed in a friendly bark, and they rowed him back and carried him up to his Aunt Jobiska's park, and she made him a feast at his earnest wish of eggs and buttercups fried with fish. And she said, "It's a fact the whole world knows that pobbles are happier without their toes."
There was a young lady of Parma whose conduct grew calmer and calmer. When they said, "Are you dumb?" she merely said, That provoking young lady of Parma.
There was an old man of the Nile who sharpened his nails with a file till he cut off his thumbs, and said calmly, "This comes of sharpening one's nails with a file."
There was an old man who said, "Well, will nobody answer this bell? I have pulled day and night till my hair has grown white, but nobody answers this bell."
There was an old person of Crowell who lived in the nest of an owl. When they screamed in the nest, he screamed out for the rest. That depressing old person of Crowell.
They went to sea in a sieve, they did. In a sieve they went to sea. In spite of all their friends could say, on a winter's morn, on a stormy day, in a sieve they went to sea. And when the sieve turned round, and everyone cried, "You'll all be drowned," they called aloud, "Our sieve ain't big, but we don't care a button, we don't care a fig. In a sieve we'll go to sea." Far and few are the lands where the Jumblies live. Their heads are green, and their hands are blue, and they went to sea in a sieve. They sailed away in a sieve, they did. In a sieve they sailed so fast, with only a beautiful pea-green veil tied with a ribbon by way of a sail to a small tobacco pipe mast. And everyone said, who saw them go, "Won't they be soon upset, you know? For the sky is dark, and the voyage is long, and happen what may, it's extremely wrong in a sieve to sail so fast." Far and few are the lands where the Jumblies live. Their heads are green, and their hands are blue, and they went to sea in a sieve. The water it soon came in, it did, the water it soon came in. So to keep them dry, they wrapped their feet in a pinky paper all folded neat, and they fastened it down with a pin. And they passed the night in a crockery jar, and each of them said, "How wise we are! Though the sky be dark and the voyage be long, yet we never can think we were rash or wrong, while round in our sieve we spin. Far and few are the lands where the Jumblies live. Their heads are green, and their hands are blue, and they went to sea in a sieve. And all night long they sailed away, and when the sun went down, they whistled and warbled a moony song to the echoing sound of a coppery gong in the shade of the mountains brown. O Timballo, how happy we are when we live in a sieve and a crockery jar, and all night long in the moonlight pale we sail away with a pea-green sail in the shade of the mountains brown. Far and few are the lands where the Jumblies live. Their heads are green and their hands are blue, and they went to sea in a sieve. They sailed to the western sea, they did, to a land all covered with trees, and they bought an owl and a useful cart, and a pound of rice and a cranberry tart, and a hive of silvery bees. And they bought a pig and some green jackdaws, and a lovely monkey with lollipop paws, and 40 bottles of ringberry, and no end of Stilton cheese. Far and few are the lands where the Jumblies live. Their heads are green, and their hands are blue, and they went to sea in the sieve. And in 20 years they all came back, in 20 years or more, and everyone said, how tall they've grown, for they've been to the lakes and the Torrible Zone, and the hills of the Chankly Bog. And they drank their health and gave them a feast of dumplings made of beautiful yeast, and everyone said, if we only live, we too will go to sea in a sieve to the hills of the Chankly Bog. Far and few are the lands where the Jumblies live. Their heads are green, and their hands are blue, and they went to sea in a sieve.
There was an old lady whose folly induced her to sit in a holly, whereupon by a thorn, her dress being torn, she quickly became melancholy.
There was an old person of Bow whom nobody happened to know, so they gave him some soap and said coldly, we hope you will go back directly to Bow.
There was an old man of Thermopylae who never did anything properly. But they said, if you choose to boil eggs in your shoes, you shall never remain in Thermopylae.
There was a young lady whose eyes were unique as to color and size. When she opened them wide, people all turned aside and started away in surprise.
When awful darkness and silence reign over the great Gromboolian plain, through the long, long wintry nights, when the angry breakers roar as they beat on the rocky shore, when storm clouds brood on the towering heights of the hills of the Chankly Bog, then through the vast and gloomy dark there moves what seems a fiery spark, a lonely spark with silvery rays, piercing the coal-black night, a meteor strange and bright. Hither and thither the vision strays, a single lurid light. Slowly it wanders, pauses, creeps, anon it sparkles, flashes, and leaps, and ever as onward it gleaming goes, a light on the bong tree stem it throws. And those who watch at that midnight hour, from hall or terrace or lofty tower, cry as the wild light passes along, the dawn, the dawn, the wandering dawn through the forest goes, the dawn, the dawn, the dawn, with the luminous nose. Long years ago, the dawn was happy and gay, till he fell in love with a Jumbly girl who came to those shores one day. For the Jumblies came in a sieve, they did, landing at eve near the Zamary Fid, where the oblong oysters grow, and the rocks are smooth and grey, and all the woods and the valleys rang with the chorus they daily and nightly sang. Far and few are the lands where the Jumblies live. Their heads are green and their hands are blue, and they went to sea in a sieve. Happily passed those days, while the cheerful Jumblies stayed. They danced in circlets all night long to the plaintive pipe of the lively gong, in moonlight, shine, or shade. For day and night he was always there, by the side of the Jumbly Girl so fair, with her sky blue hands and her sea green hair, till the morning came of that fateful day when the Jumblies sailed in their sieve away, and the Dong was left on the cruel shore, gazing forevermore, ever keeping his weary eyes on that pea-green sail on the far horizon, singing the Jumbly chorus still as he sat all day on the grassy hill.
Far and few are the lands where the Jumblies live. Their heads are green and their hands are blue, and they went to sea in a sieve.
And when the sun was low in the west, the Dong arose and said,
What little sense I once possessed has quite gone out of my head.
and since that day he wanders still by lake and forest, marsh and hill, singing,
Oh, somewhere in valley or plain might I find my Jumbly Girl again. Forever I'll seek by lake and shore till I find my Jumbly Girl once more.
playing a pipe with silvery squeaks. Since then his Jumbly Girl he seeks, and because by night he could not see, he gathered the bark of the twangum tree on the flowery plain that grows, and he wove him a wondrous nose, a nose as strange as a nose could be, of vast proportions and painted red, and tied with cords to the back of his head. In a hollow rounded space it ended, with a luminous lamp within suspended, all fenced about with a bandage stout, to prevent the wind from blowing it out, and with holes all round to send the light in gleaming rays on the dismal night. And now each night and all night long, over those plains still roams the Dong, and above the wail of the chimp and snipe, you may hear the squeak of his plaintive pipe. While ever he seeks, it seeks in vain to meet with his Jumbly Girl again. Lonely and wild all night he goes, the Dong with a luminous nose, and all who watch at that midnight hour, from hall or terrace or lofty tower, cry, as they trace the meteor bright, moving along through the dreary night, 'tis the hour when forth he goes, the Dong with a luminous nose, yonder over the plain he goes. He goes! He goes! The Dong with a luminous nose! Mr. and Mrs. Discobolus climbed up to the top of a wall, and they sat to watch the sunset sky, and to hear the Newport Pipkin cry, and the biscuit buffalo call. They took up a roll and some chamomile tea, and both were as happy could be, till Mrs. Discobolus said,
Oh, WXYZ, it has just come into my head. Suppose we should happen to fall. Darling Mr. Discobolus, suppose we should fall down, floppity, just like two pieces of stone onto the thorns, or into the moat. What would become of your new green coat? And might you not break a bone? It never occurred to me before that perhaps we should never go down any more.
and Mrs. Discobolus said,
Oh, WXYZ, what put it into your head to climb up this wall, my own darling Mr. Discobolus? Mr. Discobolus answered,
At first it gave me pain, and I felt my ears turn perfectly pink, and your exclamation made me think we might never get down again. But now I believe it is wiser far to remain forever just where we are.
and Mr. Discobolus said,
Oh, WXYZ, it's just come into my head. We shall never go down again, dearest Mrs. Discobolus. So Mr. and Mrs. Discobolus stood up and began to sing.
Far far away from hurry and strife. Here we will pass the rest of our life. Ding-a-dong, ding-dong, ding.
We want no knives, nor forks, nor chairs, nor tables, nor covers, nor household cares. From worry of life we fled.
Oh, WXYZ, there's no more trouble ahead.
Sorrow or any such thing for Mr.
And Mrs.
Discobolus. Mr. and Mrs. Discobolus lived on the top of the wall for 20 years, a month and a day, till their hair had grown all pearly grey and their teeth began to fall. They never were ill or at all dejected, by all admired and by some respected, till Mrs. Discobolus said,
Oh, WXYZ, it has just come into my head. We have no more room at all. Darling Mr. Discobolus, look at our 6 fine boys and our 6 sweet girls so fair. Upon this wall they have all been born, and not one of the 12 has happened to fall through my maternal care. Surely they should not pass their lives without any chance of husbands or wives.
and Mrs. Discobolus said,
Oh, WXYZ, did it never come into your head that our lives must be lived elsewhere, dearest Mr. Discobolus? They have never been at a ball, nor have even seen a bazaar, nor have heard folks say in a tone all hearty, what loves of girls at a garden party those Mrs. Discobolus are. Morning and night it drives me wild to think of the fate of each darling child. But Mr. Discobolus said,
Oh, WXYZ, what has come to your fiddledom head? What a runcible goose you are, octopod Mrs. Discobolus. Suddenly, Mr. Discobolus slid from the top of the wall, and beneath it he dug a dreadful trench, and filled it with dynamite, gunpowder gench, and aloud he began to call, let the wild bee sing, and the bluebird hum, for the end of your lives has certainly come. And Mrs. Discobolus said,
oh, WXYZ, we shall presently all be dead on this ancient runcible wall. Terrible Mr. Discobolus.
Pensively, Mr. Discobolus sat with his back to the wall. He lighted a match and fired the train, and the mortified mountain echoed again to the sound of an awful call. And all the Discobolus family flew in thousands of bits to the skies so blue, and no one was left to have said,
Oh, WXYZ, has it come into anyone's head that the end has happened to all of the whole of the clan, Discobolus?
Said the duck to the kangaroo.
Good gracious, how you hop over the field to the water too, as if you never would stop. My life is a bore in this nasty pond, and I long to go out to the world beyond. I wish I could hop like you.
Said the duck to the kangaroo.
Please give me a ride on your back.
Said the duck to the kangaroo.
I would sit quite still and say nothing but the whole of the long day through, and we go to the D and the Jelly Bow Lee, over the land and over the sea. Please take me a ride. Oh, do.
Said the duck to the kangaroo. Said the kangaroo to the duck. This requires some little reflection. Perhaps on the whole it might bring me luck, but there seems but one objection, which is, if you let me speak so bold, your feet are unpleasantly wet and cold, and will probably give me the rheumatiz. Said the kangaroo. Said the duck.
As I sat on the rocks, I have thought over that completely, and I bought 4 pairs of worsted socks, which fit my webbed feet neatly, and to keep out the cold, I bought a cloak, and every day a cigar I'll smoke, all to follow my own dear true love of a kangaroo.
Said the kangaroo. I'm ready, all in the moonlight pale, but to balance me well, dear duck, sit steady and quite at the end of my tail. So away they went with a hop and a bound, and they hopped the whole world 3 times round. And who so happy, oh, who, as the duck and the kangaroo?
was as small as a button. So to make it look big, he purchased a wig and rapidly rushed about Dutton.
There was an old man on some rocks who shut his wife up in a box. When she said, "Let me out," he exclaimed, "Without doubt you will pass all your life in that box."
There was an old man of Dunluce who went out to sea on a goose. When he'd gone out a mile, he observed with a smile, "It is time to return to Dunluce."
The owl and pussycat went to sea in a beautiful pea-green boat. They took some honey and plenty of money wrapped up in a 5-pound note. The owl looked up to the stars above and sang to a small guitar. "Oh, lovely pussy, oh, pussy, my love, what a beautiful pussy you are. You are, what a beautiful pussy you are." Pussy said to the owl, "You elegant owl, how charmingly sweet you sing. Oh, let us be married, too long we have tarried. But what shall we do for a ring?" They sailed away for a year and a day to the land where the bong tree grows. And there in the wood a piggy wig stood, with a ring at the end of his nose, with a ring at the end of his nose. "Dear pig, are you willing to sell for 1 shilling your ring?" Said the piggy, "I will." So they took it away and were married next day by the turkey who lives on the hill. They dined on mince and slices of quince, which they ate with a runcible spoon. And hand in hand on the edge of the sand, they danced by the light of the moon. The moon, they danced by the light of the moon.